Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. We are in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 16. Let's start in verse 1. When David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, there was Ziba, the steward of Mephibosheth, waiting to meet him. He had a string of donkeys saddled and loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, 100 cakes of figs, and a skin of wine. The king asked Ziba, "Why have you brought these?" Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and fruit are for the men to eat, and the wine is to refresh those who become exhausted in the desert." The king then asked, "Where is your master's grandson?" Ziba said to him, "He is staying in Jerusalem because he thinks today the house of Israel will give me back my grandfather's kingdom." Then the king said to Ziba, "All that belongs to Mephibosheth is now yours." "I humbly bow," Ziba said. "May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king." Ziba is, of course, the servant of Saul that got tasked, even though he's now a wealthy man, got tasked with maintaining Mephibosheth's inheritance for him, because Mephibosheth is Jonathan's son, and David wants to honor him, but he's also lame in both feet and basically is useless. He has to be maintained by others. And with the collapse of Saul's family, their clan is basically not capable. And so Mephibosheth now sits at David's table, and Ziba, the servant, maintains the property and gives him the Mephibosheth the proceeds. Ziba is probably making a profit in this process. He's definitely got political favor with David by doing so. He, however, wants all of the profit. And so he comes out to meet David. He's probably taken a quick inventory and decided that he'd rather bet on David than Absalom. That Absalom probably doesn't care about Ziba or Mephibosheth at all, and Saul's property at all. If he ends up with Absalom as king, he may lose it all. He may even lose what he legitimately earned on his own. On the other hand, with David, he has a chance to improve his position. So he goes out and meets David. He brings food and refreshment. He brings transportation. And because everybody's walked out with what they can carry, and they basically abandoned most of their property in Jerusalem. And basically the clothes on their back. They didn't plan. When you do a hasty evacuation like that, you don't pack out everything. You don't necessarily even pack animals with food and stuff, shelter. And Ziba sees this opportunity to help his friend David and to better his position in life. We'll find out later that Mephibosheth did not think that he was in a position to gain something from Absalom. He wanted to go with David, but being lame, missed the party. Took him too long to get ready, and he just had to stay behind. And since, in one sense, he has no pony in the fight, it doesn't matter who's in charge. His inheritance is not the kingship. Only if they both died would he have any chance of being anointed king. And then probably not, because David's other sons would then be vying for kingship. And Mephibosheth probably knows that. And he probably feels in his heart he really doesn't want to be king anyway. But Ziba is wanting to create discard between David and Mephibosheth so that Ziba can get more of Saul's property. And he succeeds for the moment in getting the property because he tells David a lie and he says Mephibosheth thinks that he's going to get to be restored to king. So he stayed in Jerusalem. Now, if David had been thinking correctly, he would have recognized right away Mephibosheth is probably not going for the kingship. And if he was, he wouldn't think that Absalom was going to give it to him if Absalom is trying to get it himself. And Mephibosheth would have to kill Absalom and then usurp the throne that Absalom tried to gain and then defeat David. And David probably knows Mephibosheth better than that and knows that he's not that kind of man. Let's face it, he's been in court. He's been one of the people that ate with David day in, day out for years at this point in time. David knows him fairly well. He's probably depended upon him to do politics in his name, things like that. Mephibosheth isn't going for the throne. He's not the person to, and he knows it. And he's probably quite content to just be in David's court. He might think that transitioning to the next king's court would be a sound political move, but he's not likely to get a high influence with Absalom. Absalom doesn't care about Jonathan, never knew him, isn't going to, think his son is an important person. Absalom's going to think, what can you do for me that I can't get from somebody else? Absalom is more likely to think Ziba, the servant, is more likely to get me political influence because, let's face it, he's rich enough that he has a bunch of servants and a bunch of sons and he can work a bunch of land. And Mephibosheth, he's lame and he sits at the table and eats. So Ziba is telling a lie to David. And that lie will get found out eventually. We'll get back to that when we get there. But at the moment, David gives Ziba the judgment he wants. Okay, if Mephibosheth is also in rebellion, you can have the land. Ziba thinks he got what he wanted. Verse 5. As King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and left. As he cursed, Shimei said, get out, you man of blood, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord has handed the kingdom over to your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a man of blood. Now, I understand that in the world of politics, people from the other party always think their version of things. The truth is, David did not kill any of Saul's family. He's not a man of vengeance on Saul's family. He did not overthrow Saul. Saul was killed in battle, fair and square. The men that claimed to have killed Saul on the battlefield, the man, came to David bearing a, quote, good news. And when David heard it, he had him killed for killing Saul, and said, "You testified your own self you killed him," and had him executed for killing the king. As it turned out, that wasn't the truth. He had probably looted the body before the Philistines got there. And but that is sufficient. If you claim you killed it in a court of law, you claim you're guilty. David goes, "Okay, you're guilty. Execute him for killing the king." You don't need a lot of testimony if the person themselves testifies they committed the crime. I think he's pretty wise in that. The two men that then killed Saul's son, who was reigning, and brought the head to David, they also got executed for killing the king. And, that's the only closest we have to anybody that could claim they were part of David's group that killed anybody. As it turns out, everybody else that died in Saul's family either died at the hand of the Philistines, and David's done his best to defeat them, and has kept them out of the country, and killed a lot of the Philistines. Hasn't destroyed the country yet, but he's trying to work on that. He has other goals that he has to do to keep the country safe, and he can't just focus on one enemy. And he is actually trying to avenge the family of Saul. For God gave him the kingdom. He didn't take it for himself. And God worked out the details. So Shimei is actually lying about David, Now, David is a man of blood. He has been a soldier since he was a young man. He has killed a lot of people in battle. And other than Uriah the Hittite, he has not killed anybody that's an Israelite that wasn't guilty. Now, as a ultimate judge of the land, the person who controlled ultimate life or death sentences, he probably had people executed, like the man that claimed he'd killed Saul, and two men that had killed Saul's son and brought the head to him, and had them executed because they were guilty. David had done that kind of judgment, and probably, we have no record of it, but it's reasonable. I mean, kings had to, and had people executed. But that's just being king. When somebody's murdered somebody and you find them guilty in your court of law and the punishment is execution, once you find them guilty, you have them executed. That's just part of what his job is. He's not gone out of his way to create a political vendetta against Saul and his family. The common practice for a lot of the countries around is the new monarch would go in and kill all the members, it depends upon what country, exactly what members of the family. But in some of the worst cases, they would kill every man, every male in the whole clan, force the women to be slaves, or marry them for political reasons, or whatever. And very often, even their political allies go in and wipe the clans out. So if there was a different clan that had supported the king and was prominent politically, the new king would go in and wipe that clan out also. Every male, from newborns on, just to prevent them from causing problems. And when we get to the book of Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, we're going to see instances of this. because the northern kingdom, the kingdom that the 10 tribes that became known as Israel, that becomes a standard practice. They go in when one dynasty ends and the next one starts, they go in and wipe everybody out. Some of the more bloodthirsty cultures around them, they would even kill all the women. And there was one of the cultures that didn't fare very well, but they would even kill the livestock. They would leave nothing, burn the house, and just leave farmland and rebuild. Uh, pretty gruesome practices. David honors God. He does not practice that. He did not go in and do political retribution against Saul. He trusted that since God gave him the kingship, and without him having to kill Saul or any of his sons himself or any of the clans, that God would keep Saul's family from rising up in rebellion. And David was right. He did not have to seek revenge against the prior regime. He could leave them in peace. That's why Shimei was alive. So Shimei is telling a lie about David. Yes, he's a man of blood. He's killed a lot of people in battle. But they're Ammonites and Philistines and Hittites but they're not Israelites. Anybody he's killed that was an Israelite was guilty of a crime that was punishable by death. And the only two cases we know of where he passed a judgment, he had somebody else be the executioner. He did not do the execution himself. Now, that would not make him guiltless just because he had servants do the executions. He, like Uriah the Hittite, who killed with the Ammonites, he would be guilty. But David is not guilty of killing any of Saul's family, unless, unknown to us, they had committed a crime where being executed was the punishment. And, if that was true, Shimei would probably have been mentioning them by name. Because he's got his mind made up that God's punishing David for what he did to Saul's family. Thing is, David did not do anything to Saul's family. And David's going to get vindication eventually over Shimei. Shimei is also more than just cursing and yelling obscenities and lying. He is throwing stones. And this depends upon, exactly how big the stones and how hard he's throwing, how far he's throwing. Could be serious. If he's throwing fist-sized stones, if they hit the wrong person in the wrong place in the wrong way, they could be fatal. They could cause definite permanent damage, loss of an eye, broken bones. Even if they're hitting places in the body where it's relatively safe, rib cage, things like that, they could be causing bruising, damage that people don't need just because they're fleeing Absalom. It's also an insulting thing to do in Hebrew culture. And so he's being insulting with his actions as well as his words. Verse 9. Then Abashi, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head." Now, Abashi is a warrior. He's one of the honored warriors that when we get to David's list of honored warriors, he's on that list. He is full brother to the general Joab. He has done notable things in war, killing giants and standing his ground and killing a large number of people in a single battle by himself. He's led men into battle. He's done effective military things. He's probably one of the men that David has had execute people before. He knows how to kill a man. He is armed for battle because he's a warrior. And he knows that before this all shakes out, he's going to be in a fight for David's life. And he has a natural reaction. Let me go execute this man who's lying about you, who's being insulting, who's being dangerous. You know, who knows whether one of my men may lose an eye because he throws a rock in the wrong place, or, you know, breaks a hand and therefore can't fight, and we lose a good soldier in the fight. You know, he's thinking like a warrior, and he's like, give me permission and I'll go cut his head off and we're done. Verse 10. But the king said, what do you and I have in common, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David, who can ask, why do you do this? David then said to Abishi and all his officials, my son who is of my own flesh is trying to take my life. How much more then this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will see my distress and repay me with good for the cursing I am receiving today. So David restrains them, and not only Abishi, he tells all the others. He basically gives a kingly order and says, if God's inciting him to do it, you know, we'll be fighting against God if we go kill him, and we'll be cursed even more. If he's not been assigned to do this by God, let God deal with him, and we will be blessed because he's cursing us unjustly. David's beginning to think well and rationalize well, and realizes that if Shimei is of God, executing him will be the wrong thing to do. If he's actually opposed to what God wants done, which he turned out to be, excuse me, then God may bless them because he's going to turn the cursing into blessing. And that God's capable of that. And so David restrains his men that they don't shed unnecessary blood. Verse 13, so David and his men continued along the road while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went and throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. So Shimei continues this antic and doesn't just throw stones, but also throws dirt to put dirt on them and make them dirty, and it's insult even more than throwing stones. Throwing stones was a warlike action, and he probably heard the Abishi and his intent. He may not have heard David's response because they're some distance apart, and he may have realized, you know, if I hurt somebody, David may change his mind even if he heard what David said. Or some of the men may decide that I'm going to rebel against David and get rid of this irritant. And so he slows down the rocks, but he still wants to show his contempt, so he's throwing dirt. Well, that translates well into our culture too. I mean, throwing dirt at somebody is just dirty business, right? It's insulting, it's annoying, it's showing contempt. And they're going along the path, and he's on the hillside above them doing this. If he had continued throwing rocks, he might have actually caused some damage, and David might have changed his mind. He considers a little wiser action, but he's still being very rude. He's still being very inappropriate. Verse 14. The king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted, and there he refreshed himself. So they arrived where they meant to camp. They set up camp, and David finally gets some rest. Everybody's exhausted. They're fleeing in a hurry, and they're trying to get far enough out of town that Absalom doesn't catch them while they're still running from town. Verse 15. Meanwhile, Absalom and all the men of Israel came to Jerusalem. Ahithophel was with him. When Hushai the Archite, David's friend, went to Absalom and said to him, Long live the king! Long live the king! As Absalom asked Hushai, Is this the love you show your friend? Why didn't you go with your friend? Hushai said to Absalom, No, the one chosen by the Lord, by these people, and by the men of Israel, his I will be, and I will remain with him. Furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve the son? Just as I served your father, so I will serve you. So Hushai is trying to get in with Absalom, as King David told him to do, so that he can know what's going on, send good intel to David. He is also there to frustrate the good advice that Ahithophel is going to give. Ahithophel is in on the conspiracy. He's part of those who support Absalom, and he's an advisor to the king. He is a wise man. He's crafty. He knows how David works. He knows how David thinks, and he knows how to make better plans than David does. He knows how to outthink David. And so if he's giving plans and Absalom pays him attention, Absalom might win. And Hushai is there to frustrate those better plans that Ahithophel will probably give. And so, Hushai is the heir to try to make sure that David has the best intel and the best chance of surviving. That Absalom makes strategic mistakes that sound like they're smart. Verse 20. Absalom said to Ahithophel, Give us your advice. What should we do? Ahithophel answered, Lie with your father's concubines whom he left to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself a stench in your father's nostrils, and the hands of everyone with you will be strengthened. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he lay with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. I don't really get how having sex with these 10 women in public is supposed to make Absalom's men support him better. I mean, I see why having sex with some of David's concubines, even though they're virgins, could confer a king-like public appearance to Absalom. He now has part of the king's harem. He therefore has king-like qualities. Putting on a porn show for the crowd, yeah, it'll titillate them, it'll excite them, it'll make them know that Absalom is absolutely odious to David. And the thing is, if I was supporting Absalom, it wouldn't make me fight smarter, harder, I might enjoy the show, but you know, um, it's not going to make me a better warrior. It's not going to make me smarter. It's not, you know, it. Yeah, yeah, but the thing is, if I'm committed to Absalom, I already know that David and he are going to fight civil war. That's what I already signed up for. This doesn't make him more committed. It doesn't make his men more committed to backing him. Um, this could actually backfire, but it fulfills some of the some of the prophecy that Nathan had given David when he uh, had had adultery with Bathsheba. He, Nathan had told him, "Your own, some of your own women, somebody else will have sex with them in public because of this. This was you did it in private, but it's going to become public, and this is part of the sign." So this is fulfilling that prophecy that Nathan made. Blood won't leave your family. Um, he's already lost one son, Amnon. Before this part of the tale is out, Absalom's going to be dead, so he's going to lose another son. There's going to be other, he's also lost the son that Bathsheba had that was the product of their adultery. And so, David, this is the continued fulfillment of what God told David through Nathan. Verse 23. Now in those days the advice of Ahithophel gave was like that of one who inquires of God. That is how both David and Absalom regarded all of Ahithophel's advice. So, Absalom trusts Ahithophel just like this was God talking to him. It's not. Ahithophel, let's face it, is doing a conspiracy against God's anointed king. He may be a crafty man, he may be a wise man, he may be a shrewd man, he may know how to give good advice and have people do what's best for the country. He is not God. He's not that kind of wise. He was views that kind of wise. And in some things, such as how to wage war, he probably was pretty wise and had good strategy and good planning, and if it was well executed, it would be very effective. Unfortunately, he is not a moral man, or otherwise he wouldn't have had Absalom have sex with these 10 women. Now, they probably had no consent in this. I can't say it was necessarily rape, though, because the culture, they had been sent to, be servants to the king and try to get his eye and become, hopefully the king will see you and want to marry you, and then our clan is married into the royalty, and that's your opportunity, your king. And so they probably would have been like, okay, there's been a change of king, and the new king wants to have sex with us. Well, hey, the clan told us to get married into the royal family. Well, it wasn't King David, it's King Absalom. They probably see it as an opportunity to marry up. That's probably how they viewed it. They probably did not think it was rape to have sex with him, but they were they're going to be the victims uh, because Absalom loses this fight. He doesn't get to be king. And David, when he comes back, is going to treat these 10 women like they're Absalom's widows. And is going to put them up and house them and feed them and give them a job, but he's going to treat them like their husband died. Um, and by the law of the land and the way that they viewed things, Absalom married these 10 women by having sex with them. And so David is treating them correctly, that they are the widows, going to be the widows of Absalom. Rather unfortunate for them. They effectively lost their job and had no control over it. How many people today lose their job because somebody else made a mistake? You know, does the name Enron strike a bell with anybody? You know, how many people lost their job, their retirement, everything because management in Enron made mistakes? You know, same business. It happens. At least David treated them well. But I'm getting ahead of the story there. The Absalom at this point is following Ahithophel's advice, and everything he says, he's doing it. Chapter 17 deals with how Ahithophel tells Absalom to engage in war, and how Hushai then counters that advice. And but that's another whole part of this story. We'll deal with that next week. At this point, Absalom is not thinking clearly. He's not thinking king-like. Yeah, he's following advisors who are advising out of their strength. Ahithophel is good at battle planning, but not good at running the country well. Because marrying these 10 women does not make, well, it may, in the common man's eye, make Absalom look like he's king, because he's now married women that were sent to Jerusalem to marry a king, and so he's married them, but that does not make him king-like. He's, in following that advice, probably thinking of his gonads, not actually putting any serious thought into what the consequences would be. He doesn't think about what the country would think of it, or what these 10 women would think of it. What are they going to do? Are they going to support me? Or are they going to feel raped and, cut my throat in my sleep? He doesn't think about that. And he then, puts a tent up on top of the palace where everybody can see it, and he has sex with them up there. Now, in that day and time, that should have angered all 10 women. They should not have gone for that. It was very much a Middle Eastern culture. Women were protected. Very often, the whole facial covering, head covering, body completely covered. If you saw the toes on the sandals, that would have been, then the hands, that would have probably been most women in, the face. It would have been all you'd seen of them in public. And here, he's exposing their entire nudity to the public, to an adoring crowd, so to speak. The Israelites would have seen this as a porn show. Him treating them like prostitutes. They may well have felt that. Yeah, they may have felt like, okay, we're getting married to the king, and that's a good thing. But they would have also thought, he doesn't respect us much. And that cannot be a good start to a marriage and a good start to a kingship. To have 10 of your queens, when they contemplate it next month, think, maybe we'd be better off with him in the grave. What can we do for him? How can we speed him into the afterlife? Let's face it, they cook your food, they make your bed, they make your clothes, they have access to your bedroom. Nobody searches them when they go in and come out. They're in charge of cutting vegetables, have knives, needles for sewing, etc. Torquing off 10 women in your household is a bad idea. Absalom doesn't think that through. And he executes this plan. It's further proof that Absalom was unfit to be king. I mean, this is foolishness, no matter how you think about it. And I think God was giving Ahithophel bad ideas so that he would then have Absalom do bad things and continue to get God's wrath on him. Let's face it, God does mean to kill Absalom for killing Amnon and for trying to overthrow his dad, the king. And that's going to happen. But God is making sure that the common man in Israel, when it's all done and said, realizes that Absalom was not the best choice. That he was a pretty boy, but he was a fool. And this is going to, in the public mind, sear into the public mind that Absalom is a fool. He's a reprobate. He's somebody who does not take the country's best interest in mind. He's going to be viewed as he's putting on a show for himself and his own glorification and how virile he is. But he's not considering his people and the effects on them. And at the moment, people haven't come to that conclusion yet. But after it's all said and done and they sit and think about this, that's part of what got recorded in the story. Everybody realizes it shows who Absalom is. He's interested in his own interest, not the country's. David is famous for having the country's interest at heart and not being concerned with his own. Yeah, sure, he has to rule, and there's perks that come with that, but he's ruling to make sure the country is safe and protected, and he's willing to go out on the battlefield and risk his life to keep the common man safe at home so he can plant crops and harvest them and sit in his own house and eat meals and be content. And David is serving and doing justice in God's name so that the common Israelite can live in peace. Absalom is wanting to be king to fulfill his own desires. And that will be his legacy. And when it's all said and done, Israel will realize they're better off with David. Holy Father, we thank you that you brought about Absalom's downfall. That along the way you showed us how foolish he was, from how he handled his brother to how he handled being, tried to escape judgment for murder. And then when he did, when he came back, how he conspired to become king. And then how he's self-centered and self-serving and not country focused. And Lord, thank you for opening our eyes so that we can see and look around us and see who is self-serving, who is serving the country, who is serving their own interest and the interest of their friends. Have us to be wise and discerning, that we can see this same kind of behavior today. Lord, I asked that you would give us wisdom. We have another period of time where we're exercising our right and responsibility to vote. Give us wisdom in how to vote, who to vote for, what new laws that are being proposed that we get to vote on, that we would vote correctly for them, that we would vote with wisdom. Lord, have us to have actual wisdom instead of like Ahithophel, a craftiness that serves our own interest. Lord, we ask for wisdom. We ask for your great knowledge to be handed to us, that we would do the right thing, that we would be moral, and we would be upright. In your holy name, amen. I am your host, Frank Reich, Associate Pastor of Family and Ministry here at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church. I would love to see you on Wednesday night where we can discuss this and more. We had a good service in worship this morning, and this is being recorded on Sunday, May 7th, 2023. Oscar finished his good sermon series on what we put on the throne of our life. And we should be putting God first. And today he was talking about success and how if we put it being successful above being faithful to God, while success is not inherently wrong, if we put it ahead of God, we do ourselves harm, and it'll frustrate our lives because we can't ensure success. If we put God's things first, as Jesus said, if you put first the kingdom of heaven, then all these other things will be added to you. And what God views as success is sometimes much different. And I appreciate that. I hope to see you Wednesday. If not, I'll see you here on YouTube. I hope to see you in church Sunday. Y'all have a blessed week.